Today I will start with the Yoga Sutra, Vastu-sāmye citta-bhedāt tayor vibhaktaḥ panthāḥ. This Sanskrit phrase, Vastu-sāmye citta-bhedāt tayor vibhaktaḥ panthāḥ, from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, the 4th chapter, the 15th sentence sutra, roughly translated as the same object appears different to different people because their perception is influenced by their individual state of mind and their own projections. The sentence is intended to explain that everything is ultimately empty and only acquires meaning through the way it is perceived by the observer. Perhaps similar to Schrödinger's cat, who knows? But let's translate the words as best we can and analyze them a little. Vastu-sāmye refers to the same object or thing. Citta-bhedāt means something like due to difference in the mind or through the diversity of the mind. Tayor vibhaktaḥ panthāḥ means something like the paths are separated, splitted. This verse is a key principle in yogic philosophy that emphasizes the subjective nature of reality, the big illusion Maya. It states that reality is not objective but depends on our inner state. The verse can help us understand why people react differently to the same situation or perceive something completely differently, including other people. The verse can and should encourage us to question our own perceptions, to look at things from different perspectives, even zoom out and see the bigger picture, and to recognize and realize that our own interpretation is shaped by our own perceived reality. It can also explain why people misuse yoga and use it for negative purpose. It's not yoga's fault, it's the people's fault. And that brings us to today's topic. The mythological, ancient, forgotten fear of yogis, and what it still teaches us today. Once upon a time, long, long ago, in a faraway place, in a small village on the outskirts of Varanasi, many centuries ago, a stranger came barefoot along the dusty path, as if out of nowhere. His hair was matted into long braids, his body converged in ashes. He carries nothing but a pumpkin shell in his hand. He did not speak, he did not look anyone in the eyes, only the wind followed him, as if he were not of this world. The children hid behind doors, the elders whispered, "A yogi, a black magician, stay away from him, or he will curse you." Such stories, or similar, were certainly not uncommon at the time when one encountered a yogi. The yogis of that time, those ascetics who turned their backs on the world, were considered dangerous and mysterious. They left their families, possessions, and social obligations. They meditated in places that seems very strange to other people, on lonely mountains, peaks, or even in cemeteries. Fasted and conjured up strange powers that people could not comprehend, both good and often bad ones. In a good sense, the powers of breath and thought. And for the common people, all this was strange, weird, and incomprehensible. Anyone who lived like this must be up to something dark. That can never be a good thing. In fact, this fear is deeply rooted in history. Ancient texts from the Tantra and Siddha tradition speak of powers known as siddhis, the ability to read minds, become invisible, or walk through the air. However, benevolent yogi who meant no harm never showed these powers to anyone. They knew that otherwise their power would be taken away, as their ego would be activated and their practice would be ruined. Siddhis show how much the consciousness of an enlightened person can detach itself from the material world, what the mind or the human being could actually do or create if it were truly pure, also pure of heart and ego-free. This in turn has always frightened people who did not understand it, so it was immediately dismissed as evil, also because there have always been charlatans, especially in this time's Kali Yuga. This is how the black yogi, a person who supposedly possessed magic and supernatural powers, came to be seen as something bad. Many of these ascetics, especially the Aghori sadhus or mass yogis, thought their spiritual powers were others turned away, in darkness and death, in confrontation with transcendence. They lived on cremation grounds and wore the ash of the dead on their skin, not out of cruelty, but to understand the cycle of life. In yoga, being born has the same quality as dying. One is not better than the other. But those who observed this did not see spirituality or the pursuit of something higher, but madness and evil. Over the centuries, perceptions fluctuated between awe and fear. Some yogis were healers, saints, sages. Others used their influence to gain money, power, and do very, very bad things. Ancient chronicles contain reports of wandering ascetics who posed as gurus, collected donations, money, and intimidated people, or much worse stuff. Some rulers employed yogis as advisors or spies because they were considered charismatic and clever smart. Others, especially during the British colonial period, were seen as dangerous rebels. The British called them black magicians, witch doctors, or fanatics. Some groups, such as the militant Naga sadhus, actually became part of uprising against the colonial power. They are so-called holy warriors. From the colonial ruler's point of view, these wild ascetics were a factor of chaos, uncontrollable, unpredictable, and the enemy. Those myth and power, fear and respect merged into one big soup. But it is not only the past that was ambivalent, and it often portrayed in a comical way. In the 20th century, yoga was also used in various ways, not always for the good. One of the darkest examples here would be between 1930 and 1950. I think you know which time I mean. In Europe, especially Germany, there was a big leader and a group, ideologues, drew on Indian scriptures and yoga teachings, as it is well known. Most know this from Indiana Jones movies. I think that they were really possessed with these old myths. They did this to support their own theories of body control and spiritual purity. Spiritual purity in this time sounds very paradoxical, doesn't it? They removed yoga from its ethical, moralic, compassionate context and shaped it into a tool for the mind, for the bad, for only discipline and power, and for a very negative side. The true means, the liberation of the mind and the unity of all life, was completely perverted in the process. Unfortunately, similar things are still happening in modern times. Some so-called gurus or yogi influencer build spiritual empires around themselves, fan base, demanding abundance, or they are the chosen one, seek money, or want devotions from others. Yoga is a marketing product, meanwhile, and there are plenty of notorious criminal gurus out there. They talk about enlightenment while creating dependency and worse. This is the other side of the light, the temptation to misuse spiritual knowledge for personal power. And yet, amid all these shadows, another picture shines through. At the same time, around 1930 till 1950, also teachers emerged who reinterpreted yoga as a path to healing and self-knowledge. Teachers like Swami Vivekananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, Shivananda, or Krishnamacharya were up in that time. They opened a new perspective on this profound philosophy, especially to the misguided West, in the hope that things might eventually change. Yoga, not as magic, but as a science of consciousness, as a bridge between body, breath, mind, and soul. One does not distance oneself from nature, no, but lives in harmony and goodwill with all beings and planet Earth. Thus, the image of the feared magician was transformed into that of a teacher of peace. But perhaps this is not a contraction. For those who truly understand the depth of yoga, know that light and darkness are not enemies. They are two sides of the same coin, but parts of same experiences even, in a dualistic world. The yogi who was once feared sought nothing but truth. In the best case, of course, there were also some bad yogis out there, but a goodwill yogi would seek the truth. And truth always confronts what we would rather not see. Today, yogis, dressed in white clothes or really fancy, expensive clothes, post sun salutation and really acrobatical stuff on social media, speaking about awareness, mindfulness on TikTok in 20 seconds. But here, too, more people talk about it than actually live it. All for the money, right? For many, it has become a normal job, like going to the office to earn the money, a trend. The old is repeating itself. History is repeating, just repackaged with a new look and new style. The ego is very active. The true meaning often remains in the background. The liberation of the soul in the here and now. Achieve a mukta, but that is not always a pleasant path. The original power of yoga was never comfortable, and it was never about showing off or making a name for yourself, crying in front of a camera, showing what a good person you are. No, the meaning is lost. That was not the meaning of yoga. And perhaps we should remember that right now, because the world is full of false light and subtle manipulations, which likes to dress up as holy and chic. Like in the movie, the devil likes to wear Prada, right? Those who follow the path of yoga today must relearn what it really means to be a yogi or yogini. Not a magician, not a guru, not an influencer, a money maker, a marketing strategist, no, but someone who is really to face themselves. Without excuses, without fear, without showing how good I am and how long I can cry, with and just pure open heart. You have to cleanse yourself internally and externally and let go of influences or manipulations. That is a hard discipline, not done in half a year or even it takes lifetime. And that in turn is the true magic, if you want to call it like that. But back to the unpleasant topic, the misuse and the dark side. How? Yeah, the old groups of this big leader abused yoga, the dark side of a peaceful teaching. When we think of yoga today, most of us have peacefully images in our minds, people in quiet rooms, deep breathing, perhaps the desire for inner peace, singing Kumbaya, my lord, or whatever the cliché meanwhile says. But hardly anyone knows that yoga was once used in one of the darkest periods of history, between 1930 and 1950. Yes, indeed, even the leader and his group discovered yoga, but in their own perverted way. It is a chapter that is little known, but says a lot about the danger of what happens when spirituality becomes ideology and is misused. Yoga, in that time, a totally twisted, bad story. In his book, Yogi, blah 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 leader, I can't say the name here on YouTube, Berlin-based yoga teacher and author Mathias Tietke examines precisely this, how leading group fanatics such as Rosenberg or Himmler incorporated yoga, Indian philosophy and spiritual concepts into their worldview, but by simply ignoring and distorting everything peaceful about it. In their promotion or aka propaganda, even this leader himself was named a yogi. Incredible. Not by real yoga teacher, but by this newspaper magazine called Völkische Beobachter, the most important at that time. It resembles a bit on Huxley's Brave New World, where words twisted and false perceptions prevailed. It claimed that this leader drew his strength from the Upanishad, the ancient Indian scriptures in which yoga plays a central role. He was stylized as a man who valued concentration, willpower, and self-control above all these else. A kind of Aryan ascetics, but even the word Aryan is totally misunderstood. It was never ever that meaning. the ideology of duty. In this interpretation of this old time, everything that actually defines yoga disappeared. Ahimsa, nonviolence, was simply deleted. Even ethic and moral, like an open heart, not hurting anybody in thoughts, words, and mind, they cancelled it. Instead, this group emphasized aspects of the Bhagavad Gita that they could exploit for their own purpose. They portrayed the big warrior Arjuna as a role model, the warrior who fights on God's orders, without compassion, without doubt. They portrayed Arjuna as bloody thirsty or as wanting to be so, which is not true. It's exactly the opposite. But they only read half the story. They read what they wanted to read. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna and Arjuna have a long dialogue, a communication. Arjuna wants to give up because his attackers are his own family relatives who wants to kill him. Krishna tells Arjuna that he must fight because it is his duty, dharma, as a born warrior. So his family over many generations was warriors. It was not that he was born in a businessman family or selling man or stuff like that. After all, he was born as such. And even if he does not want to kill anyone because of Ahimsa, he must stand up for what is true and right. Krishna explained that the soul, Atman, is eternal and that the death of the body is not the end. So he explained karma and reincarnation. Fighting is therefore his calling, and he should fulfill his duty with serenity without worrying about the fruit of his actions. So he was not fighting to get popular or a status or stuff like that or money. No, it's really the opposite. He said also, let go of all the fruits or being filled with hatred. So it was really the opposite. Arjuna only fights because he basically has to defend himself. Otherwise, he would never have wanted to harm any of his opponents. He wanted to lay down his weapons and even let himself be killed. But this group and this leader from the old times, between 1930 and 1950, were not interested in this ethical depth. They only wanted the part that reinforced their cult of duty, struggle, and allegiance. This gave rise to Aryan Yoga, a cynical reinterpretation of teaching that originally preached compassion, knowledge, and equality. This leader, or also the similar, they talked about royal yoga, the Raja Yoga, but even that was twisted. This leader himself read works by Schopenhauer and even the ideologist Hauer, who later became even a member of that group. And this Hauer interpreted yoga as spiritual self-control only, as concentration on combat. For him, the royal yoga was only about fighting, not about cleaning your heart, yourself, and all that ethical, moralic stuff. His interpretations completely ignore physical exercises, morality, ethically, a pure heart, even food, everything. They cancelled out everything. What remains was only ego, mind, cold, disciplined, separated from compassion. It was heartless. And even the Himmler, the head of the group, wanted to form his troops into a kind of spiritual order. He recommended reading the Bhagavad Gita, meditative training, and concentration exercises, but only to promote ruthlessness and duty fulfillment. And by the way, they also took a lot of drugs or substances, what is even not good, and even yoga says don't do that. In promotion or propaganda magazines of this time, such as the Illustria Beobachter, there were even photos from the soldiers in yoga position, shoulder stand, candle, forward bending, stuff like that. But the meaning was disordered, it was wrong. Nothing about it was healing or even sacred, but quite the opposite. Harshness, not awareness, controlling, not letting go, and hatred, no love. It was a total twisted time. Everything that yoga could actually give people was upside down and exploited for something very bad and evil. Tietke explains that this group incorporated yoga into a kind of racist narrative. The term Aryan, which means noble, in ancient India, was also twisted. Noble is the heart, the pure soul is noble. In the 19th century, thinkers such as Schopenhauer and Chamberlain associated the word Aryan with Germanic, while un-Aryan or Jewish was considered inferior. What is totally wrong. Noble, pure is the soul and the heart, no matter if you're young, old, big, small. It's the inside what is noble, not the outside. That was never What they said in that time, the true meaning, noble, is really only the true self, a loving heart. In doing so, they transformed the spiritual concept into a tool of exclusion, of evilness. A path to unit became an instrument of division. What normally units, now separated. Yoga was not seen as a universal truth, but as proof of a supposedly superior species or whatever race. Even the partner of that leader, Brown, Madame Brown, interprets to note that, or some people say that she was attempted to practice yoga. I'm a bit skeptical, because only old films recordings showing her practicing some classical asanas, postures, at the Bavarian lake, this is not a proof. Also, this is only something that could be captured visually. It is noteworthy, nonetheless. Yoga is an inner practice you can't film. Who knows, maybe she understood the true meaning, maybe not. Or was she just like the others? We have no proof about that. But even with this body-orientated practice, she remains the exception. Neither her partner, this weird leader, nor this Mr. Himmler did yoga in the true sense of the word. The idea of conception of yoga was purely ego-driven, intellectually influenced, or rather ideologically disordered and full of hate. And even after this big disaster, the shadow remains, because after 1945, around 1950, this way of thinking did not disappear immediately, of course. This, however, the ideologies continued to publish books on yoga with the same idea about this kind of Aryan brotherhood and the path of the warrior. His writings remained in circulation until the 60s, and may you find them till today in some online archives. However, an actual group yoga school of that twisted group came into their mind. They tried to build it up, but the contraction between this group ideology and the core, the seed, the principles of true yoga, compassion, non-violent, universal unity was too obvious. But Tietke warns in his book, the misuse of yoga for selfish purpose, for political or ideological purpose, or money-making, and for greed is still possible even today. In right-wing circles, so-called terms such as rune yoga or Germanic Raja yoga are reappearing in isolated cases. This is a far cry from what yoga should actually be. This is not yoga. These are marginal phenomena, but they show that old ideas sometimes return in new, very malicious and twisted, weird forms. What we can learn from this? This story reminds us that even something as peaceful as yoga can be misused if its ethics, morals, meanings, and philosophy are not understood or are even ignored. Yoga is not a tool for power or for the ego. No, it's a tool for purifying and liberating oneself and for consciousness. It is not a path to superiority, but to unity. When people try to appropriate yoga, whether for politics, money, for influencers, or for businesses, yoga loses its true meaning and people loses their soul and heart. That is why it is important to preserve the true core of yoga, ahimsa, nonviolent, satya, truth, and the realization that all beings are connected. Perhaps we should ask ourselves what happens today when spirituality becomes a brand, a company, or when gurus exercise power over their disciplines, when influencers show how cool they are and cry and how they are the chosen one. History shows that whenever the path to inner peace becomes a means of external control, something is lost. Yoga can liberate us, but only if we do not use it for the ego or for the evil purposes that harms others, not as an ideology, but as a reminder of who we really are. Think about it, and let me know your thoughts on that topic. Shanti Om.
Smug. You think I haven't thought of it? Getting him back? Gojo Satoru, that damn sorcerer. The only one who could stare death in the face and grin like a fool. And yet, you flinched, didn't you? He circles the throne like a predator, his cursed energy flared. When limitless and six eyes aligned,
Even you respected that power. Respect. No, but I do enjoy a good meal, and Gojo was a feast for the soul. Still, that death, too easy, too clean, it felt lacking, like biting into rotten fruit that looked ripe. Then why not bring him back? Not to save him, but to break him again, properly, perfectly. Know your place, fool. I said that to Jogo once. But perhaps this world needs to hear it again, from the both of us. Use that brat, Megumi. His body is still a conduit, still tied to Gojo's domain through fate and damn irony.
領域展開無料空所
interesting if Gojo's soul is wandering. If that cursed brat's body can bridge domains, then perhaps I will call him. Not to resurrect,
but to drag his prideful corpse into battle once more. Let him see the world he died trying to protect. Let him see it kneel, and then crush him, not with power, but with despair. He thought he was the honored one. Let's remind him, I am the honored one.
The room grows darker. The throne pulses with cursed energy. Somewhere in a liminal space between life and death, Gojo stirs.
領域展開無料空所
Om Shanti Shanti Om